2 hours.
Hello and welcome to another Movie Boozer virtual pubcast. Joining me today is Hawk Ripjaw.
Hi.
And laughing was Bill Arsenault.
Yeah, hey everybody, what's up?
Yes, the sky, the ceiling tiles.
Yes, indeed. What is up?
Fan. I see some clouds. A lot of things are up.
A pure white ceiling.
Okay,
There's a house in the distance with balloons. Okay, so we have a lot of movies to discuss. So
I see a silverfish on the ceiling. I think I don't know. Maybe it's a termite. We've had termites flying around the last couple weeks. So I don't know.
We are going to jump right in here and start reviewing some movies. So,
okay,
the first one, John Wick 3, Parabellum.
What's a parabellum? Is that like a part of the body?
Parabellum is it's two things. It's a style of firearm, and it is Latin for prepare for war.
Ooh, that sounds really good. That's an excellent subtitle.
Yeah. And they actually define it in the movie, which is interesting.
That's even better. Keanu was like, "What's a parabellum?"
So
is that in my crotch?
So the third entry of John Wick, if people recall my review of John Wick 2, my review was that it was very good, but not quite as entertaining as the first film. And the biggest question I had with it is because of how open-ended the ending was, you kind of relied on this third film working to make the second film worth it. And this movie made that absolutely worth it in every way, shape, and form for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's a little bit of Deus Ex Machina towards the end.
But
for the most part, the first half of the movie it builds off of what the second movie's finale set up. It pays it off really, really well. And it's what did you give do you remember what you gave the second one, Ken?
Oh, beer-wise?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. I don't even know if I gave it an official beer rating. I didn't review it, but...
I thought you said, in your review.
Oh, well, I mean, when we spoke about it last.
I got you.
What would I give the movie? Right now that I've seen John Wick 3, I can reappraise it in its own way because it's part of that trilogy. I would give the first film a solid toast.
Right. I think that's what I gave it when I reviewed it.
I think if I had to do a beer rating, even now, I will say it is a step down from the first one. I will give it I think 2 beers. It's solid. It's solid. It's just a clear step down from the first. And John Wick Chapter 3, despite the fact that you're right, there are some moments that try your belief, your suspension of disbelief. But honestly, that's been. All of these movies have been building up to the fact that John Wick is essentially a god of gunfights. So
I reviewed John Wick 2 on the site, and I gave it a toast.
Okay, fair enough.
I gave the first one a toast as well, so I guess I reviewed all 3 of them.
Yeah, I'm going to give Chapter 3 a toast.
I'm waffling between a toast and 2 beers for Chapter 3, only because...
Did you like it more than 2?
It's really hard to say whether I liked any of them more than the others because they're just all so good.
Yeah, and it's a continuing story. Well, at least the second 2 are. The first one has a very definitive end to it.
Right.
And that's why I think that the first one holds up the best, because it doesn't rely on any knowledge of anything before it and is very self-contained.
Yeah, so the thing that kind of led me to maybe give a second beer to the third one is that towards the end, the whole deal that takes place in the desert is kind of inessential to the story.
So the whole desert thing, I actually dug because it gives even more. It poses even more questions than it answers. Mm-hmm. So for those unfamiliar with John Wick series, just to give a brief overview, John Wick is a hitman who lives in this in a modern day world. Same, it is America that he lives in. It's the New York area, but it's this version of America where there's an entire underground society of hitmen that have they have a whole set of rules, an entire culture, their own internal economy that is going on while the world, it continues to exist. It's on its own.
I bet their economy is Bitcoin based.
Kind of. It's they're coins.
You see anything?
Oh, no, I was talking to Ken about this. I feel really bad. I haven't seen any of the John Wick films.
Oh no, the currency of this universe is literal gold coins.
Yes,
that's funny.
John Wick just hands over a gold coin or two, and then the thing is done. Like
whatever. Yeah,
a cleaning crew shows up to clean up after a massacre where he killed some intruders, or
the transaction's complete. Here's a gold coin.
Exactly, yeah, and it's kind of so that's one of the things that works about this series so well is that there is this huge, like probably better than any modern franchise as far as I can think of. The John Wick series are a really great example of show don't tell. Because you don't get somebody who has this long monologue that explains why this organization has a council called the High Table and what that hierarchy of power means. You just kind of see that unfold through lines of dialogue sometimes where somebody mentions the High Table or mentions the consequence of this action, but there's never any flashback or monologue really digging into a lot of that. You just kind of see it unfold organically throughout the story. And
go ahead.
It just keeps the thing about the John Wick 3 where it gets to this point where they have to keep stacking escalations in terms of this world until it's completely bonkers. In this desert scene, I guess I don't want to spoil it, but this desert scene it blows the scales even further open, and that the actual specifics of that one didn't quite work for me, but I think if I think about it some more, I might have to knock it back down to a toast because I did have a blast with the movie.
So the world building involved in it really caught my eye. Just to put this in perspective, the world of John Wick, the High Table is basically sort of like a board of directors of hitmen who set the rules and enforce them, and it's implied in the third film that there is one person who is even above that. And in order to see that one person, John Wick has to journey on this long trip out into the desert. And I'm not going to go into too many specifics, but I will say that the thing I really like is that it puts this almost Assassin's Creed style, ancient mythos into this world where it's highly implied that all of this entire world of hitmen descends from an ancient band of traveling Bedouins in Africa. And I just love that because the idea of it being this one little tribe started this thing that's now secretly controlling all of the illegal activity in the entire world is fascinating to me. Now, I agree with you from a dramatic perspective. They didn't explore it as much as I might have wanted them to, but this movie ends with a very open-ended ending too, and so I'm giving them the credit that they know where they're going with this, and that they're going to explore it further in the fourth entry. That's what the issue I had with the second film is. It did the same thing that this film did. It introduced a bunch of stuff, and it only fulfilled a few of them. But this movie answered basically every question I had from the second film and posed new ones. And so, basically, I'm sold at this point, and I'm ready for them to expand on it even further in the next film.
I expect they will. Yeah. One thing that I'm going to be curious if they keep expanding on is the action, because once again, this movie has topped the other ones in terms of the action sequences.
Yeah.
And I read this great interview with the director, Chad Zaleski, who is also Keanu's stunt double back in the days of The Matrix and whatnot.
Right.
And he's also the stunt coordinator and fight coordinator and stuff. his method for he's getting interviewed on his method for choreographing fight scenes, and he was like, me and my team just get bored easily, so we'll go someplace and think of new ways to kill people. So they were in the New York library, and they thought, wouldn't it be great if John Wick killed somebody with a book?
Yes.
And so one of the opening fight scenes in the movie.
Well, gee, how did they come up with that? They're in the library.
Yeah.
Sure,
Well,
yeah, but that's what
like,
they, that's
let's
what they
research these books. Let's look inside the books for evidence. What if he kills someone with a book?
But the question is how? Like, what is the logistics behind it?
Oh, like if it's Shakespeare, he'll say something like to be or not to be, bitch, or something like that.
Not so much. John Wick is not a verbose killer.
Yeah, he doesn't have one-liners.
There's maybe the occasional thing that you could qualify as a one-liner, but really for the most part, he's a silent protagonist. And
what I'm getting at is the stunt coordinators they won't just be like, oh, John Wick just shoots everybody or John Wick just punches everybody. It's like, no, he kills somebody with knives. He kills somebody with a book. He kills somebody with this.
This reminds me of the gag men back in the days of silent comedy.
Oh yeah,
the writers that would come up with gags to disperse throughout the movie for like Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd or something, and they were highly in demand. Doing choreography and figuring out these complex sequences of stunts and thrills and goofs and whatnot, just to get you through the picture, because the plot really wasn't as important. Like, it kind of was, but it was like the gags kind of had it was like the gags were the cereal inside the meat. It stretched it out a little bit. So that's what this sounds like. It sounds like you got new gag men, except they're into killing.
Yeah. Well, gag in this case would equal
strangulation. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, and they also make it interesting in the way, like in the library, the fight is kind of quiet because they're in a library, and there's kind of this there's a very tongue-in-cheek sense of humor to the series. It's a little bit goofy, but in a way that takes itself seriously. Everything just is, and you kind of just go with it because it's so tight and focused and confident in what it's doing.
And one thing that this movie brings into the world of John Wick that explains so much about his gracefulness under fire is they imply that he was basically raised as like a ballet dancer, but a ballet dancer in death. And that's the thing. Like, essentially, he grew up in this. He grew up in Angelica Houston is like his almost surrogate mother figure, and she is the angry East German ballet trainer who.
This sounds like the backstory to Black Widow or something. Sort
of, except this actually gets shown and you get
it's not just like a quick couple clips. It's actually fleshed out a little bit more, huh?
Oh yeah. So basically, there's a scene where he revisits this ballet. What do you call it? Ballet house, theater, whatever. And and you see all these other people who are training in ballet, and it's very highly implied that John Wick came out of this group, and that these people are also being trained as killers.
Oh, okay.
And that makes so much sense because of how graceful all the action is in this. He is just so masterful at what he does. And the movie has amazing... I think the highlight of this film that everyone's talking about is just the ridiculous knife fight in the first act.
Yes.
There is a throwing knife fight that is the knife fight to end all knife fights. It is gruesome. It's grotesque. It is beautifully shot, and it is just it flows perfectly.
Is it greater than the one in Eastern Promises?
Yeah, it makes Eastern Promises look castrated by comparison.
Oh, that makes even more sense considering they were half naked or fully naked in that scene.
Yeah, seriously, it is. That's the thing about the action in John Wick. One thing I've noticed is the people who don't get John Wick watch the movie and just sit there. The people who get into this movie laugh their asses off during it because it's the only reaction you can have by how impressive they manage to make every shot. And literal kills. It is just such. I roared through this movie with laughter just because of it was my only way of coming to terms with just how completely perfectly choreographed everything was. John Wick actually is probably choreographed more tightly than most musicals get choreographed.
Yeah.
And it's shocking. So I give
So
this movie a solid toast.
You're saying it's better than Equilibrium, which was all about gun kata.
Yeah, this movie makes Equilibrium's gun. Wow. Okay, this
I'm done.
this movie makes Equilibrium look kind of laughable by comparison.
Well, it is kind of laughable. It's already a laugh.
Yeah,
it's already a laughable movie. Yeah.
I mean, of course, you could also just watch the Equilibrium ripoff movie that the Asylum did, Ballistica.
You could also watch the HBO adaptation of Equilibrium called Fahrenheit 451.
Oh God.
I don't know if that was the if so that took a long time to get made.
There's a lack of gun kata and fire.
Yeah, there's a lack of gun. There's fire kata maybe.
You guys just that joke went completely over your head.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it did. What was the point of it?
I guess because they were dressed kind of like in Equilibrium.
No, because the politics of the HBO Fahrenheit 451 are so badly made. They more closely resemble the bad guys of Equilibrium than of the source novel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You went a few levels too deep for me.
Well, it's weird. Kurt Wimmer did Equilibrium, and then he did Ultraviolet.
Yeah. And then he wrote Law-Abiding Citizen.
That was a laugh riot, Ultraviolet. I saw that in the theater over a coin flip. We were trying to figure out a triple threat coin flip. We were trying to figure out what movie to see, and we were like, okay, let's just see Ultraviolet. We didn't know anything about it. It starts off with a comic book Marvel, like how Marvel movies start with the comic book quick cuts in the title sequence. And we're like, oh, is this based on a comic? And then we discovered later it wasn't.
It's
just styled threw that in there. It was just styled like one. And then the movie made absolutely no sense.
Because it had Mia Jovovich as a vampire that has a
or
sword,
something.
And then at one point she drives a motorcycle up the side of a building with a helicopter chasing her.
Yeah, and then the bad guy isn't a vampire, but then it turns out but he's like a germaphobe, but then he gets infected, but then he realizes he reveals he's actually a vampire all along.
Yeah, we're making this movie we're making it sound way cooler than it is.
No, it's incredibly stupid and dumb and
I kind of want to watch it again.
Yeah, I think I still got it actually. I don't know, but I think it's on Hulu right now.
Oh, good. Yeah. But anyway, closing thoughts on John Wick Chapter 3. It's really fantastic. It's really entertaining. Bill, you've got to watch these movies. You're going to love them.
Okay.
There's a way about them that feels very classical in terms of cinema, but they're also dynamic and colorful and creative and really fun to just dig into.
Okay.
All right. So the next movie that we're going to talk about is Brightburn. Also known as Untitled James Gunn Horror Project.
Even though James
Gunn
didn't write it or direct it.
No, he produced it. He was an executive producer, and he was on set for a lot of the shoot.
Yeah, he produced it and maybe consulted on it. But
it was written by his brothers.
No, it was his brothers. It was his idea from the conception, and he handed it off to his brothers to write.
Oh, okay. I guess.
It's his movie in terms of the original idea.
Okay.
So Brightburn, I definitely enjoyed the movie. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but one thing that the movie does that a good horror movie does is it delivers some genuine cringe moments where you're just, ugh. And
it's basically if young Superman, but it's a slasher and he's evil. It's literally a slasher film.
It's the Antichrist.
No,
but not religious and not following the the revelations.
It's basically Superman, but
Yeah, no, it's literally evil Superman.
yeah, like the whole concept of a spaceship crashes to Earth and there is a superpowered baby in there who, when he gets to a certain age, realizes that he has powers. So that's Superman. But then instead of being a champion for good, make him a champion for just self-involved evil.
It's more than that too. The similarities go down to it's in Kansas, and the parents hide the spaceship in the shed.
The garage.
In the shed, yeah. But at this point, the movie diverges a little bit, and the spaceship starts speaking to the kid, and that's when he starts, becoming a problem child and hurting people and creeping on a girl, and
Oh yeah, I read about that. I read that he was kind of a sex pervert.
Well, I mean,
not really a sex pervert. He was more like, just because he's too young for that. He was just interested in the other sex, but he wasn't like interested in sex. It was like,
well, his dad told him, his dad had to talk with him and said, act on your impulses. And so him being an alien that doesn't really understand the nuance of speech at this point, he goes to her house and says, "I like you," and she gets freaked out, and
because that's just way too blunt to start off a conversation with.
Right. So she's freaked out. That's when he starts to go a little crazy, and pretty much the second half of the movie is him killing people in really, like, this. They say this is violent, but this movie is violent. There are some pretty alarming gore moments.
The only gore moment I will mention, just to give a perfect example of this, Bill A., you've seen Day of the Dead, right?
I've seen the best clips of it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
haven't seen the whole thing.
Well, so Day of the Dead famously has a zombie whose jaw is like hanging, and his face has been stoved in. Oh, that would be the timer from John Wick. I forgot to reset it. So anyway,
so it starts off with the jaw.
So there's a kill in this that takes the gruesomeness of that and brings it to a level that is just so because it's not a zombie going through that, it's a human being, and you watch as it's happening, and then you see his reaction to it afterwards as he slowly drowns on his own blood. It's gross. It's sickening.
Ooh,
it's
nice.
Disgusting. It is horrifying, and it's also kind of awesome.
Well, it's one of my because you don't get to see that kind of stuff as often as, especially in theaters nowadays.
One of my biggest gore moments was there's this lady that runs a diner. She works at a diner, and this was my favorite kill of the movie because it's very it's styled very classically as a slasher scene. She comes out of the back room, and all the kids' symbol. He has this symbol which is like a two diamonds next to each other, kind of. The symbols all over all the windows, and then she looks up at a light, and it blows open, a fluorescent light, and just rains glass on her face, and one of the shards of glass goes into her eye, and you get like a 20-second sustained shot of her trying to pull the glass shard out of her eye, and the glass kind of tugs on the viscera of her eyeball a little bit.
Oh yeah, that scene.
It's an extreme close-up of her just taking the glass out of her eye, and then she gets it out, and there's like a hole in her eyeball. And then you get a what?
I was just laughing.
Oh, you get a first-person shot from her perspective, and I love the way this shot was constructed because it's a first-person shot, but then the left-hand side of the screen, because her left eye was cut open, is like splattered with blood and blurry and everything, and you can see the kid, Brandon, off in the other side of the restaurant, but he's on the left-hand side of the screen. So she's only seeing him through her bloody eye. And every time she turns her head or closes her left eye, he's disappeared. Mm-hmm. So it's a really good scene of sustained suspense. It's going to happen, and then it draws it out like that, like a good slasher movie does. But I think altogether, this movie did really do a good job with the slasher element, making it a horror movie. I just don't know if it did a whole heck of a lot beyond that.
Yeah,
what this movie sounds, based on how you guys are describing it, I don't mean to cut you off, Ken, but what this sounds like is those sequences in Batman v Superman and Man of Steel, where it was like, for example, when Batman appears before Lex Luthor in prison, like the lights shut off, then they turn back on, it's red, and he's just like brooding, and he's there. He's like, "I'm gonna fuck you up," that kind of thing. And that was like a horror moment,
I would think of this
like
as like this is more horror than that. This is a straight slasher.
Okay, so it's not just like going for iconic visual flair, like out of the frames, like every frame is a painting, and that kind of thing. It's more, like you said, slasher. It's more atmospheric, maybe more attitude.
Visually, this movie does a very good job. The area where the movie starts to stumble a little bit is in its character elements. The main thing about the film that it focuses on is the sort of the conundrum of what would you do if you were the parents of this adopted kid who has superhuman strength that you're suddenly starting to realize might be a monster. And the thing that the movie relies very heavily on is the heavily done over trope of the mother refusing to accept that her son could be evil, and the father, saying he's clearly like Satan spawn or something, and it relies very heavily on that. And I don't think that they ever fully sell the fact that she, because she sees the same things her husband sees. She just makes up these excuses and
he just has a hobby. Lots of kids like his age do that.
She hangs with it way longer than it seems believable to. I can excuse it simply because slasher movies often deal in far more ludicrous leaps of logic. For the most part, I think the character dialogue was well written, and so I honestly, it didn't bother me all that much. What were your thoughts?
Does she eventually come around?
Oh yeah, she comes around eventually, and there is, I think, a pretty solid finale that.
I've actually read the spoilers for this movie, so I know what happens. But and it kind of devastated me what happens. I was like, whoa, really?
Oh yeah, the movie goes for it.
I enjoyed that it went that far. I was kind of like, normally you'd think at the end of this, like everyone dies, including the bad guy or something. I don't mean to spoil things or whatever, but I guess I am by just merely suggesting this. But the movie kind of goes in a different direction, as opposed to like, the parents have a clean slate now. They don't have the kid anymore. Instead, it's like, fuck you. And it just goes off.
It's definitely
like
this
kid's a god, or Satan or whatever, So, but I don't know.
So I think the way that the mom was developed, I thought where they were going for is that even when she learns the truth, she still sides with him.
Mm-hmm. Well, at least she says that at first, but she's really not fully committed to that.
Right. No, I thought she would fully commit to it. Like, I thought the dream that the father had would, where she's holding the kid and she's bleeding out of her eyes and mouth. I thought that would be a precursor, like a vision of her fully siding with Brandon and like sticking with him to the very end, because she was that deluded as a mother and she ignored all the other signs before then.
That might have made it a little more interesting. I agree.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I personally would have thought would make it better is that it's very clear that, or it's not very clear, but it seems to me that the movie alludes to the couple having some kind of marital issues, especially in how they communicate, because the wife lies to her husband a couple of times on very important things just to protect their son. And I think if the movie had dug a little bit more into their relationship and how their inability to conceive a child really kind of messed with their relationship. And then now they've got a kid, she's just, she's obsessed with being a mother now and she'll protect that at all costs. And you already have this built-in problem where they don't communicate well with each other and have this rift between them because of their sexual problems or their conception problems.
Yeah.
But it didn't really dig too much into that psychology. I thought that would have been interesting, but the trade-off is that you get a really gnarly slasher movie. It wasn't as thoughtful as I was hoping it would be.
I have to say though, almost any sin that this movie has, I can immediately forgive for bonus Michael Rooker as Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Oh God.
He plays.
That's like perfect casting.
Oh yeah, he appears without going into too much. He appears in the film very briefly, but it is brilliant, and he's basically Alex Jones. And that I want to see an entire movie hosted by Michael Rooker as his character's name is the Big T.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are at our 15-minute mark, though. So, any closing thoughts on this?
I am very curious to see if there's going to be a sequel and where it goes. Unfortunately, it's not.
Wouldn't the sequel basically just be, him destroying the Earth? I mean, that's kind of what it seems like it's going, right?
Well,
based on what I read.
I can spoil it if you want me to.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, the Mr. T is talking about a fish man and a crazy witch with a rope who's strangling people. So ostensibly, the sequel is setting up something like an evil Justice League.
Yes.
Oh, but what about the opposite side of that? Like, are there going to be good heroes to come back?
There might be. There maybe it won't. I mean, this movie is very dark.
Well, here's a question. You know how Batman is supposed to be like the world's greatest detective? What if instead the Brightburn universe introduced a Batman-like character who's a total Moriarty, so like the world's greatest criminal?
They probably will, honestly.
And
he's
I
gonna
know
be the one that brings them together.
So this movie was made for $6 million, and domestically it's made $15 million, worldwide $25. So that's enough. I think this movie could pull a sequel, I think.
Yeah.
As long as they keep it as a, Blumhouse level budget.
Right.
See, I like these kind of movies where it's they're surprising, but it's also like the central theme here is like some people just should not be parents.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if in the movie they deal with nature versus nurture so much.
Yes,
like,
they touch on it.
Do they? Do they
kind of?
Okay. Because it seems like,
well, the parents
on what I read,
the parents do have a conversation where they're puzzling over how, they feel that they've really, taught him well, and yet he still does these awful things. And the argument that this movie takes is pretty much straight up nature. The whole nurture thing, it basically throws out the window and says that has nothing to do with this.
Well, right. I don't know if I think maybe it's a toss-up between the two. Not in this movie, I mean in general, like in real life.
Mm-hmm. Like, well, in general, doesn't matter. In this movie, it is fully nature because he's an alien who has no hope of being swayed to the right.
Right. But there were, from what I read in the, and this was off the Wikipedia plot synopsis. Just to quickly get into it, it basically suggested a few scenes, a few bits where he was almost considering, not necessarily going to the good side, but at least showing kind of a vulnerability, emotion.
Yeah, that's accurate.
The bit where his father is about to shoot him or does shoot him, and then he looks around, he's all disappointed and sad about what just happened and heartbroken. And then he just kills his dad, like, fuck you, for doing that. But still, he was heartbroken. So it's almost like there's a little something to this kid where maybe you could, if under the right circumstances,
this movie straight up dismisses that as any possibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is not an argument the movie is willing to have. It's more of a nihilistic, it's not a factor type thing.
So speaking of bad parenting figures, how about Ma? Tell us about Ma.
Well, that's almost a spoiler in a way. Bad parenting figures. Have you seen the movie, Ken?
No, I have not.
Yeah, have you seen the movie, Hawk?
No.
Okay, you haven't. So I'm gonna be flying solo on this.
Yeah, try to do spoilers.
Yeah, well, I mean, spoilers aren't really a big deal with this movie. I mean, it's not. I mean, who cares?
I really don't care.
I kind of care. I want to be a little bit surprised by it.
Okay. Well, I'll be careful. But the parenting issue was a little bit of a tad bit of a spoiler. But I'm not. That's more like a suggestive spoiler. Like, what does that mean?
I mean, I could probably guess what the spoiler is. I can probably guess what it has to do with it, and I'm probably right. But
yeah, but that's okay. I won't get into that. And it's not even that big of one. It's more of like a surprise reveal, but it's not even a big deal.
I'll just ask this straight up. Is the
ahead.
Name of the movie a spoiler?
Well, it depends on how you think of it. Like, does this mean like her mother's going to come around and kill her? Or does it
No,
mean she's a mother?
is
Does it
she
mean?
actually the mother of a character in the film?
Do you want me to answer that?
So I think you already have. That's fine.
Well, it could actually go either way. Do you want me to answer that?
Hawk, if you want to
It's
close your
really
ears
not a big
really
deal.
quick.
It really isn't a big deal.
Okay,
in this
sure,
movie.
fine, answer it.
She's a mother to
Okay.
a child, and what is the surprise is how she treats the child. So, but I won't get into that. I mean, it's not. It's kind. It reminds me of like one of those young adult movies. That aspect of the film, you know, like what was that movie with the? She's like kept in her house all the time because she's apparently sick. But then the the white boy next door, brings her out, and they start a romantic relationship.
Everything.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Well, anyways, Ma. This movie isn't very. I mean,
Good.
I gave it a decent. Yeah, I mean, I gave it like a 2.5 out of 5 stars. It's kind of 50-50. I ultimately gave it a fresh review on Rotten Tomatoes, or I posted a fresh review through Rotten Tomatoes. It's the basic story is that this group of teenagers, one of whom is new to the town. This was apparently filmed in Mississippi, though it could really be Midwest. It's not very clear where it is. It's just all we know is this woman and her child were living in California, and then they moved back home. Home could be anywhere in the U.S.
Okay.
Small town USA, basically. This young woman, this young teenage girl, is starting in a new high school. Her mom, Juliette Lewis, I believe, is that the actress's name, Juliette Lewis?
Yeah.
Okay. She's starting a new job at a casino, and they're just trying to go about things and make friends and start a new life. The girl meets up with like some of the cool kids in town and starts hanging out with them. They accept her and everything's going well. One day they're in their friend's van, which is like a supply van, like for their dad's contract job or some shit, one of those kind of things. And they're outside a liquor shop, and they're trying to get adults that pass by to buy them booze. Again, it's a small town, small community, that kind of thing. And they're finding it very difficult to do it. Well, the new girl in town is able to get someone to do it, and that someone is Ma. They don't call her Ma right away. Her name is, I believe it's Sue Ann, played by Octavia Spencer, in an excellent performance, as she normally gives. In fact, her default setting, I would say, is excellent.
Yes, I would.
Even in shit movies, she's really great. Like that. There was that movie. What was it with fucking Steve Carell and Paul Rudd? Like about a guy who meets a moron and then he becomes their friend. They become friends and then he brings them over to dinner for schmucks or something.
Dinner for schmucks. Yeah.
Yeah, she was in that, and she played a small role. She played like a crazy woman or something, and she committed, to that performance. So she commits here too. She ends up buying them booze, and only after seeing who's in the van does she do this. Does she agree to? She looks in the van. She's like, "Oh yeah, okay, I see what's going on here. You guys watch this dog for me." She's walking a dog because she works at a veterinary shop. A vet doctor's office, and she buys them booze. They go off to the quarry, drink the booze, and basically one thing leads to another, and she ends up buying them more booze and then offers to take them back to her basement so that she knows they'll be safe. They'll drink safely. This turns into a party situation where she eventually makes the place look like $1 million, for teens anyways. Like she puts up curtains, cleans up the couch, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Sound system, whatnot, invites basically the whole high school over every weekend. Come over to Ma's house. She gets called Ma by one of the characters, and I don't remember why. I don't think there was a reason. I think he just said, "Hey, Ma." I think maybe it was one of those slip of the tongues, like kind of like when you call your teacher mom by mistake when you're in elementary school. You're kind of like, Shit! Did I just call you
I can
mom?
actually sort of answer that to an extent.
Okay.
I think it's a primarily African American sort of thing. I know this is me, the whitest human being on Facebook, saying, like for instance, there's a lady I used to work with who she kind of got the nickname. She was our boss, but she kind of got the nickname Mama, and mostly because she was a good boss, but also had a very motherly tone about her. And it became a thing where, just everyone who she worked with, even people that not just people under her, but peers of hers would still call her Mama, just because she had that behavior. And
okay, well, that could be the case, but it was a white teenage character that called her that, so it wasn't like it was within their culture or within that world or whatever, Anyway, Sue-Ann is a very pathetic type character. Or when I say pathetic, I mean more like she's kind of a loner. She's always seen alone. I guess you could say spinster.
Mm.
Is that the right word?
It's definitely not a politically correct word these days.
No, it's not a politically correct word. I know that, but that's
the correct word.
That's the classical word that I remember from like old movies, like, oh, she's a spinster, that kind of thing. She's just, a woman who doesn't have a husband and lives alone, has cats maybe. She doesn't really have cats. She has statues of cats.
Oh boy.
So she prefers the cats to be still and not moving. But again, she works at a veterinarian, a vet office. And the vet office, the main veterinarian is played by, oh God, I want to say Lily Tomlin, but it's not Lily Tomlin. She's on that show with Anna Faris, where she plays the mom.
Juliette
She's
Lewis?
also not Juliette Lewis. She's an Oscar winner. She won for I, Tonya. She played Tonya Harding's mom. You know who I mean?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the cast list right now.
Allison
Janney.
Janney, that's her name. I remembered that because I just recalled an episode of Family Guy where Peter Griffin calls a giraffe Allison Janney. Okay, so Allison Janney doesn't really factor in. She's just a picky boss who kind of gives Sue-Ann a bunch of shit. Sue-Ann we see in a bunch of. For starters, the movie starts off following this young teenage girl, but then once Sue-Ann is introduced, we cut to Sue-Ann in her day-to-day routine, which is checking her smartphone and following these kids on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, that kind of stuff. She's very lonely, but she seems to be working out something in her head. And soon it becomes clear that she's manipulating these kids through various ways. Either she claims one thing to them and then does something else, or she's setting them up for something and then tells their parents, or she's doing this, she's doing that. And slowly we see clips of Sue-Ann as a young girl in high school being bullied by the people who would become the adults of the town. And we see them throughout the movie, like they're parents of the kids, basically. It's almost like a happy coincidence that some of these kids who were within this new circle of friends, their parents picked on Sue-Ann when she was a kid. So this is kind of her way of. It's not really revenge at first. At first, it's really more just obsession. She's really just wanting to have friends again. So she kind of feels part of this clique and she's enjoying herself, even though it's very inappropriate, grossly inappropriate for an adult to be friends with high schoolers on this level, on this
and
intimate
to buy
level,
them alcohol
and to buy them booze. So, but she still, feels part of all this and everything. And then when they start to kind of scale back from that, she gets upset, and then she starts concocting her master plan. She suffers a very horrific trauma in high school, one that I actually felt with a lot of empathy for her. Because Sue-Ann as a little teenager
was bullied.
Was very sweet. She's bullied. She's unassuming. She's kind of like tricked into this friend group, and then this big prank happens to her, and it's absolutely awful. I don't want to get into it even, not just because it's a surprise, but also because it's just awful what happens to her, And and so that kind of scars her for life. You know, she isn't physically hurt, so to speak, but she is emotionally scarred. And you know, it's like now is her chance to kind of get back. And the movie treats her. It's weird. The movie doesn't really treat her like a slasher killer at first, or ever really. She doesn't really. She only kills like one or two people, I think. And one of the kills is fantastic, by the way.
Okay.
It's the one scene in the trailer where she runs over someone.
Oh.
And when she does that, she after she hits the person with the car, she goes, "Fucking cunt." I was like, "Holy shit, yes!" You know, I was like, all right, Sue-Ann. You know, which is the opposite of what you want to feel. You're supposed to not feel good for this character. You're supposed to be like, okay, she's revealing who she really is, and yet you're identifying with her. The teenage characters aren't necessarily bad guys. The teenage characters are just teenage characters. They're just going about their lives, you know, doing their thing. But Sue-Ann is most definitely off her nut by the end of the movie, and yet you still kind of feel for her. I compared Octavia Spencer's performance in this to that of Kane Hodder as Jason Voorhees in how they move their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
She seems to have this way of walking and carrying herself that is almost like it's more important than the things she says.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's almost like it's telling more about her character. Like for example, in the scenes where she's like happy and kind of getting with it and everything, she's dancing. She's her shoulders are looser. You know, she's with it some more. When she is more intense, she's kind of stiff a little bit. She walks heavy, like her steps are heavier. You know, not quite stomping, but still, it's more intimidating. And quite frankly, when they try to, when the ending happens and the characters try to get away from her and attack her, she doesn't seem affected by the attacks. It's almost like she's not immortal, but you know, she could potentially be. I actually wrote in my review that I could see a sequel happening where Ma comes back. You know, because the ending isn't open-ended, but for me, I saw an opening. And for me, it doesn't matter if it's close-ended or open-ended, because in these slasher movies, they find a way to bring the killers back. So she's not 100% a killer. She kills a few people, but she's not like slashing everyone up. She more or less, she's just really she's causing havoc is what she's doing. Mm-hmm. She kills like 2, maybe 3 people, and that's about it. You know, as far as kills go. As far as committing trauma on people, she does it to almost everybody she meets.
Nice.
And she gets hers in the end, you know, like both like to her and from her. Like she delivers hers and she gets hers at the same time.
Okay.
So that's, you know, the movie itself, it's kind of like there's a lot of quick cutting. I didn't particularly like the editing all that much. In fact, sometimes it was a little incoherent, but or not incoherent, but it was more annoying, I guess. Like you don't need to cut here. Focus on the girl, and then focus on Ma. You know, and instead we were like cutting to Sue-Ann, then to Juliette Lewis, whose art didn't matter, then to the girl, then to Sue-Ann, then to, you know what I mean? It was just jumping all over the place.
This is from Tate Taylor, and he's the director of The Girl on the Train, which is everyone's favorite Gone Girl ripoff that no one likes.
Yeah, right.
And Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire.
Wait, I don't think Precious was.
He didn't direct Precious, did he?
Yeah, that was.
Oh wait, no, sorry,
he directed The Hell.
No, wasn't. Sorry,
You're thinking of the filmmaker behind The Butler, Lee Daniels.
And what else did Lee Daniels? Oh, was Tate Taylor an actor in The Butler?
Maybe he did a movie. Lee Daniels also did a movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Helen Mirren, where they played hitmen. I think it was called Shadow.
I did a whole lot of movie research in one day on several different people.
Yeah.
I might have got my wires crossed.
You definitely mix it up, because Tate Taylor, as far as I can see, has only acted in a couple of movies.
Well, anyways, regardless, or not irregardless, but
he did The Help.
Yeah, he did that. Ken just said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ma
and Get On Up.
Oh, really? He did that too.
He did Get On Up, yeah. Okay, that's why I got confused. All right.
I remember when I submitted my review to my editor, she was like, "Oh, you don't want to talk about any racial issues in this movie?" And I was like, "It's not really that kind of movie." You know, like maybe someone talked about it once, like Mammy, Ma, you know, that kind of thing. There's a moment in there where she paints a black kid's face white, but that's about it. That's really as far as the race thing goes. I mean, it's very limited in its scope.
So,
it's really more.
So it really
about
doesn't.
The character.
It doesn't really deal with any deeper context. It's just sort of what it is.
As far as I can tell, no. I mean, maybe the conversation around the movie tries to do that, but the movie itself, not so much.
Fair enough.
You know, it's just what it is.
We are at the 15-minute mark, so
okay. So I'll sum it up by saying Ma is what it is. It's fairly fun. It's harmless, and you'll have some fun little surprises here and there. You'll even root for Ma a couple times. So.
All right. We'll go ahead then. And speaking of rooting for, I don't know. This is terrible. Tell us about Rocket Man. I have not seen it yet.
So rooting for what?
I don't know. Like I said, bad segue.
That was a very bad segue, but okay. Rocket Man.
Rocket Man is about Elton John. It is.
Oh wait, we're talking about that Rocket Man, not the one with the Disney Rocket Man with fucking that comedian guy.
Harlan Williams.
Harlan Williams. I saw that in the theater. You know.
It's was a fun
movie back then. Yeah, and Bo Bridges as a NASA guy who fucked up years ago, and then he's like brought back. You know, it's like this is my redemption, the mission to Mars.
It's go yeah. Go ahead, Hawk.
So Rocket Man, it's interesting. This is directed by the guy that
it's directed by the guy.
Well, I was gonna finish my sentence and say that it's the guy that was brought in to finish Bohemian Rhapsody after Bryan Singer went MIA.
Oh, really? So this is like his
Dexter
own.
Fletcher, yeah. This
is like his own project, like where he's in sole control.
Yes, and the difference is night and day. Rocket Man is vibrant and kind of amazing because first and foremost, it is not so. Just to also use Bohemian Rhapsody as a comparison piece, or just most musical biopics in general, where you'll get the music sequences and the songs are pretty much diegetic products of the concert sequences, and maybe music that plays over them writing a song or something else like that, right? Rocket Man is a full-on musical in like every sense of the word.
Well, when you say musical, do you mean like within a scene, within the narrative of the scene, they just break out into song?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool. So at the very beginning of the movie, when Elton is a child, I can't remember what song they sang, but then when he evolves into, when he's a younger, there's the young kid and there's the middle kid, and then there's Taron Egerton as adult Elton John. The middle kid version starts playing Saturday night at a bar, and then a bar fight breaks out. He runs out and jumps through the window and runs in all in one unbroken tracking shot, runs through a fence into an amusement park, and then turns around. It's Taron Egerton, and then a bunch of people run in like it's one of those Bollywood musicals, and everybody's dancing in the background while they're all singing Saturday Night.
Oh, okay.
So it uses the music of Elton John as ways to propel the story forward, and at key points in his life, the classic Elton John songs will be sung by the cast as kind of like structure for the story.
And I just want to clarify that Saturday, in parentheses, night's all right for fighting.
Oh, yeah, right.
Exactly. It's just one of those things.
No, I just lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
Sorry.
So, oh my God.
Well, let me just say this then. While you're trying to come up with your train of thought, I will just question, because Dexter Fletcher directed this, and he directed, he did cleanup work, so to speak, on Bohemian Rhapsody. So my question is, do you wonder if maybe he was working on these films concurrently, and maybe they threw him the bone to finish Bohemian Rhapsody specifically because they're like, well, he's doing a much better job here on Rocket Man.
He's the Rocket Man guy. Why don't we do him with the fucking Queen guy?
And my question is,
Is
it possible that the moments in Bohemian Rhapsody that do work because Dexter Fletcher was behind them?
It's possible, because Rocket Man is one of the most effective musicals I've seen in a very long time, and one of the most effective biopics I've seen in a long time. So one thing I'll say right out of the gate is that it does fall victim to a couple of the tropes of the biopic, but only because Elton John's story is kind of beholden to them. He has his heavy drug using phase. But the movie opens with, at the end of a long hallway, Elton John, Taron Egerton playing Elton John, pushes open some doors, and he's wearing this ridiculously vibrant devil suit. It's the orange devil suit with the wings and stuff from the trailers. And he's walking down the hallway with booming steps. You're like, oh my God, he's about to go on stage. But no, he steps right into a rehab circle. So the quote-unquote framing device of this movie is Elton John describing his story from young age to this point now, in this rehab group. And it's an interesting thing that the movie does is that he's very closed off at the very beginning, and he's just kind of saying things as it is. And several times, there's one point where he's crying and in the story, and there's a very clean fade transition into his crying eyes in the rehab circle. And every time the movie cuts back to him being in rehab, he's taken off another piece of his devil suit. So he's becoming more and more vulnerable the more of his story that he tells. And this is all done just visually.
Right.
And so I thought that was a really cool idea. My favorite sequence in the movie is the song Rocket Man, where Elton John attempts to kill himself. At this point, he's watched his boyfriend cheat on him right in front of him. He's just downed like 20 pills and gone through an entire bottle of vodka. And he goes out to this party and says, for my next trick, I'm going to kill myself. And he falls off the diving board into the pool. And as he sinks to the bottom, the child version of himself is playing Rocket Man on a piano at the bottom of the pool. And pretty much all in a mostly clean transition, he's picked up out of the pool, and a hospital staff is raising him down a hallway, and they're all singing Rocket Man, spinning him around in the gurney, lifting him up, putting him in a robe, and they put him into his Rocket Man outfit, and he runs out on a stage and does a Rocket Man performance, and then blasts off, literally. Like it's when Taron Egerton described it as a fantasy musical, he was very accurate, because it is very fantastical the way that a lot of these sequences are set up, because it's a lot of the more deeply into his drug addiction that Elton John gets, the more vibrant and colorful and creative the musical sequences are. So there's a whole bunch of thought put into how this movie is put together and constructed and how the sequences are done. And it's really cool. One of my favorite parts is that Taron Egerton himself actually was doing the singing as well as all the other actors.
There was a big talk about that.
Yeah, because Bohemian Rhapsody, they used Freddie Mercury's original vocals for a lot of the music. So it wasn't actually Rami Malek singing.
Right.
This one is all Taron Egerton.
Sort of like Ray, where Jamie Foxx did. Right?
Yeah, and
Jamie Foxx. I'm sorry, no. Jamie Foxx didn't do his own singing for most of Ray. It was I keep mixing that up with Walk the Line.
Oh yeah.
Never mind.
And Taron Egerton is perfect as Elton John. It's really incredible. There's a sequence where he's singing Pinball Wizard and the camera's spinning around him. And if I didn't know any better, I would swear that they just snuck Elton John in for a couple of those shots. Because it's really incredible.
Elton John covered Pinball Wizard?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
And it's a good cover too.
Huh.
Okay. And there's I was talking about this with Will and Matt. It's actually that they said that this movie successfully made them not hate Crocodile Rock.
Oh, and I've always enjoyed that song.
Crocodile Rock is okay, but the sequence in this movie where they do Crocodile Rock is, again, one of the best ones in the movie. It's kind of awesome. I almost don't even want to spoil what they do in the sequence, because it's such a transcendent moment for the career and the life of Elton John. Like, that's when he kind of like hits his, that's when he really is like, he's in it.
Is it the Muppet Show appearance?
No.
Because one of the best performances of Crocodile Rock is when the Muppets did it.
It's not like it doesn't actually recreate. It doesn't recreate too many of his actual performances that I know of. But
Okay.
there's a moment in this performance where it solidifies that Elton John has become a phenomenon. I'll say it like that.
Fair enough.
Okay, well, does it show him playing on stage with Eminem?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, then
Did he
it's
do
an automatic.
Crocodile Rock with Eminem?
No, he did. He did Eminem's song "Stan"
Okay.
at some music awards show, and this was to basically say Eminem is not a homophobe,
Oh.
or something. Yeah, it was like something.
I will admit, I would love to see Eminem perform Crocodile Rock.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be like the payback, right? Like, okay, I did this song for you, now you do Crocodile Rock for me.
That's the trade-off.
That's the trade-off. Yeah.
Actually, I take it back. The movie does recreate some concerts and sequences because during the end credits, it'll do that thing that biopics do where it shows a shot from the movie playing and then it freezes it and then compares it side by side to a photograph, and it's like a perfect recreation.
Yeah,
it does a lot of that, which is cool. The performances are really great. Again, Taron Egerton, of course, is the standout. Richard Madden plays his manager and lover for a time. I can't remember the guy's name. He was played by Adrian Gillen in Bohemian Rhapsody. It's the same character. The Queen's manager in Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh.
What's the guy's name?
I don't know.
Parker Posey? I don't know. That's just the first name that came to mind.
John Reed.
Oh, okay.
And then Jamie Bell plays Bernie Taupin, his songwriter for years. One of my favorite sequences in the movie is that they're at a diner together and they have an argument, and Jamie Bell starts singing Yellow Brick Road as kind of like the sequence for them having their falling out. And it just, leads into the part of the movie where he decides to go to rehab. It's not if you know the story of Elton John, there won't be too many surprises here in terms of what happens. The real pull of it is how Dexter Fletcher kind of uses the music of Elton John and kind of weaves it into the story and lets the songs work for these parts of the story, and how all the performances and the singing and the fantastical and colorful elements of the songs come together into this really, really kind of vibrant package. There is a little bit of pacing issue around the middle. Just kind of I think any biopic has this issue for me, like when they're hitting their stride and they're doing a good time, they're doing a good job, having a good time. It's kind of okay, let's go. I think most biopics have that, and this one falls victim to that as well. But I think for the most part, it really, really nails everything.
So very important to me here. Did Mike Myers show up and make a Wayne's World joke?
No.
Then I will see this movie this weekend.
So also Dexter Fletcher. I mean, he has a history of acting too, right? Like he was in fucking Attack of the Clones.
Not only that, he was in Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
Well, I was making a joke about Dexter Jetster.
Oh yeah, well I was pointing out that Dexter Fletcher was actually in a really funny movie. So,
okay, well, I'm
on.
just saying, I was making a joke about the fat guy, the fat alien guy that runs the diner.
The diner, yeah.
The 50s diner.
The last thing I'll say is that it a whole lot of the movie is Elton John accepting himself and coming to terms with who he is with his new name, because Elton John is not his birth name, and really loving who he is. And there's a finale in the rehab circle that I will not spoil, but I will say that the movie kind of retrofits the concept of Elton John coming to terms with his drug problems and loving who he is, and it kind of expands it into a general self-love topic for anybody who struggles with their self-image, and it kind of speaks to anybody who has that issue. And the way that it's constructed, this scene, it was genuinely moving to the point where I was getting a little choked up with how they had Elton John confront all of his demons. one of the most masterful sequences I've seen in a film so far this year. It's really, really something. So I was not too hot on seeing Rocket Man, but after I saw it, I was really, really pleased that I did.
So Rocket Man gave you a rocket in your pocket, man.
No.
It was a failed joke.
Yes.
This would be a perfect time to close the podcast, but we have 3 movies to discuss.
No. Okay.
All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to Godzilla, which I also haven't had a chance to see yet.
So neither have I. I tried to see it today, but something else came up.
Good, because this movie's terrible.
No,
I'm serious. I want to see it.
I mean, it's got good visuals, but that's about it. I mean, they only last momentarily.
Wait, so before you keep going, I want to ask you one thing. What are your thoughts on the 2014 Godzilla?
Oh, I loved it.
You loved it?
Yeah, I really loved it. What's wrong?
I loved it too.
Oh, you mean this guy's on the same page as I am?
Yeah. So if you were like, I didn't like 2014 Godzilla, it was boring.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with. It has nothing to do with all that stuff. This movie is just. It's hard to describe. Okay, I was in a good mood seeing this movie. I watched it across the street at our local movie tavern, which is like a Marcus Theaters sports bar movie theater. Only because I didn't want to drive 25 minutes out of my way to the AMC, the closest AMC where I could have gotten a free ticket. And, it was all rainy and everything. I was like, fuck it. I'll just go to the movie tavern across the street, order myself some mozzarella sticks, which I did. And it was nice. But actually what was surprising were the chicken tenders. I was like, wow, these are really moist. Okay, so Godzilla King of the Monsters opens with what's the name of the organization? Monarch?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the monster organization. Already I'm fucking bored. And they announced that they're all over the world. They've gone international or something, or maybe they already were, but now they're kind of more known after what happened. They even acknowledged that what happened in Godzilla 2014 took place in 2014 within the context of this movie.
Oh, okay.
So that's interesting. And we start off with a scene where the guy from Friday Night Lights and Vera Farmiga and her daughter, not Millie Bobby Brown or Millie Brown Bobby. What's her name? Millie Brown?
Millie Vanilli?
The girl from Stranger Things. She's not her character yet. She's played by an even
Millie
younger...
Bobby Brown.
Yeah, she's played by an even younger actress in this opening sequence. They're in the debris of what happened in Godzilla 2014, looking for their son, who is revealed to have died during that event. This leads to a separation between the parents. The father goes off exploring hunting science or something, maybe primal science or some shit. I don't know. He studies the patterns of animals and stuff. Meanwhile, she goes off to work for Monarch, and he's got a grudge against Godzilla and all these creatures because of what happened to his son, and she just wants to kind of move on and try to find a way to coexist. So she, out of nowhere, in the beginning of the movie, we were introduced to this briefcase computer system that she has, which will simulate the bionic frequency of these monsters and come up with a sound that they'll recognize and will calm them down, or will make them react in an angry way or a happy way or whatever. Basically, it makes them sound like their mom or dad or villain or whatever. Right away, after she successfully initiates this software with Mothra, or what will eventually become Mothra, the entire lab is blown up and everyone in it is killed except for her and Millie Bobby Brown. They are taken hostage and told to basically the plan of the bad guys, who are eco-terrorists, wanting to bring the world back to the world of the creatures or something. Or no. It's to bring the environment back to a balance because apparently the creatures are so radioactive that it's like a volcano. A volcano is destructive, but it also creates new land. So it's like their radioactivity will actually flourish gardens and plants and shit. So it's like
that's been a plot point in a monster movie before.
Probably, but
that's pretty much a plot point in all of the Godzilla movies.
So anyway,
the early
the eco-terrorists want to do this. Meanwhile, Monarch are like, there's got to be another way without mass destruction, right? So the plan is basically to release as many monsters as possible, including Monster Zero, who is known as Ghidorah, the three-headed serpent creature, and flying serpent creature, who is also revealed to be an alien.
From Planet X, at least that's...
Yeah, from another planet. Yeah, we don't know what planet, but we just know it can't... And Ken Watanabe calls him a false king. He's like, oh, that's the false king. I was like, why?
Well, King Ghidorah is his actual name.
Yeah, I know, but like, what prompted his ass to say that? You know what I mean? Like
because a screenwriter thought it sounded cool.
Yeah, well, that's just, So, okay, so... that's the plan, and Monarch is like, okay, we got to get the father into this because he knows about this technology, and also he may have some interest in finding his ex-wife and daughter. So they get him, and he's like, kill all these monsters. They don't deserve to be on this planet, blah, 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 that kind of thing. And they released Monster Zero and a couple other monsters. They're like, every place that has these monsters are going crazy. Skull Island, this place, that place, Paris, whatever. They're all destroying all these cities. What are we going to do? And they're like, let Godzilla do his thing. And, Godzilla does his thing for a while and almost dies at one point. Then they have to revive him. Which was a pretty cool scene, actually. Now, I want to, before I get into this movie sucking, I will say that I went into it wanting to love it because the trailers were, from my perspective, fantastic, or at least from a visual standpoint. Some of the dialogue in the trailers had me worried, like when they were like, "Oh shit," or what's his face is like, "That's messed up." Like I'm the guy who says the wisecracks. That's messed up. Like that stuff had me worried, but then you see the monsters fighting and it looks glorious. So I was like, okay, and then I read some reviews. Some of the reviews were like a little hypocritical, I thought they were kind of, because before they were like, there wasn't enough monster fighting in this movie. Now they're like, there's too much monster fighting in this movie.
Right.
I'm like, well, what does it matter? What matters is, did the movie make sense and was it entertaining? All that stuff. Like, it gives a fuck, and the monster fighting should happen because it is a monster movie, but is it... Now, what I loved about this were the performances of Godzilla and the other monsters. I would imagine this wasn't just animated. I would imagine there was a lot of performance capture. I don't know who were the motion performance captured actors that were performing as these monsters.
It's always Tom Hanks.
Yeah, right. But they deserve a lot of fucking credit because you could see these creatures emoting through their bodies. Like Mothra is like this graceful being that is also kind of like, they say it in a stupid way, but they're like, oh, so Mothra and Godzilla had a thing? They had a thing years ago? I was like, shut the fuck up. You don't know that. And besides, we just saw Mothra birth. They had a thing years ago.
Okay, so
shut the fuck up.
So Mothra keeps getting rebirthed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. Okay, fine. But they don't bother to explain that.
Are there two very tiny little Japanese girls who raised Mothra or like worship? See, the problem is I watched. I think the biggest problem, the reason I have so much bias in these American Godzilla movies, is I've seen so many of the Japanese films and I enjoy the ridiculousness of them. And
right, they're supposed to be grand and ridiculous and a little silly, but also fun, very fun. This isn't like, all right, Guillermo del Toro nailed it with Pacific Rim. You know, he was able to bridge kind of an Independence Day style story, like the end of the world, that kind of thing, with giant creatures and robots fighting. And the fights actually had a purpose to them. They had a scale, and they told a story, and they were silly and ridiculous and bold. Here, the monster fights are pretty cool. I will grant that. Especially the final fight between Godzilla and Ghidorah. That's pretty spectacular. And the fights do, in fact, tell a story because you do see, like I said, the creatures are kind of emoting here and there, and they're kind of like, yeah, motherfucker, you know, they're kind of like, you know, doing their thing. You know, they're kind of like, you know, puffing their chests out. They're like, yeah, let's fight, you know, that kind of stuff. But on the other end, the humans keep getting in the fucking way. And their stories suck so much. And on top of that, the movie is just this incoherent. The visuals of the creatures are great. However, there is a lot of visual confusion in this movie. I don't know if it's because some of the scenes are too darkly lit. I didn't see this in 3D. I saw this in regular 2D, you know, big screen thing. So it should have been bright, but a lot of the scenes were darkly lit, and you had to be reminded in the next scene what happened in the previous scene. A character dies at one point by being stomped on and by a monster. And it's kind of funny actually what happens. It was like she's like, ah, and then pfft, literally it's a pfft. And then in the next scene you see her name on a screen with her face and it says deceased. And I was like, oh, that's what happened? It was so weird how it was done. It was like she could have been knocked away. She didn't have to have been dead. I thought she got knocked away or something. It was very confusing. There were other scenes that were just like that. It's kind of like in Batman Begins. Everyone complains about that first fight that he has with the thugs, with the mob thugs in that warehouse district area where he's introduced as Batman. And it's kind of like an arm is here, a leg is over there, another arm punches out, you know, that kind of thing. And it gets very repetitive and confusing. It's that kind of photography, but for the people and the story, the stuff that's supposed to kind of anchor you to things. On top of that, it's very exposition heavy to an annoying level, and the main actors could care less or couldn't care less about what they're not committed. They don't give a shit. Which they probably shouldn't anyways. It's not a good movie. You know,
to be fair, I will say that the vast majority of Godzilla movies have the same flaw that you're describing, which is that the human characters are not particularly interesting. But
I know. I'm probably grading this with expectations that are a little too high, perhaps. But that's the thing. My expectations really aren't that high. I'm like the model has been done for a modern day monster smash 'em up movie. We've seen it. The Godzilla 2014, Pacific Rim, even Kong Skull Island had a lot of great stuff in it.
I would say Kong Skull Island's only flaw is that it had way too many ideas. It had a lot of good ideas. It just
had too many of them and didn't have enough time to flesh out
exactly.
That kind of thing. So in that sense, yeah, but Godzilla King of the Monsters, it's like it's only there for the purpose of I don't know
setting up Godzilla
versus Kong. Yeah. And there's there is, from what I could tell, there was actually no. I didn't stick around for the post credit scene. I found out later there was a post credit scene, and it involved the eco terrorists getting one of the heads of Ghidorah, and they're like, "Yeah, we can use this later," you know. And I was like, when I read that, I was like, "Oh,
okay."
They think this is a good idea. Yeah. Well, I guess they would. They're the bad guys, so you know.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the thing of the Godzilla series, right? Is the hubris of humans thinking they can control these creatures.
Yes.
Right, but okay, that's done in this movie. Yes, there is a hubris, but there's no other smarts to it.
Okay.
It's just them being dicks or whatever. Like there's a bit in there where Vera Farmiga is explaining the plot of the movie, and everyone's like, "You're crazy! You can't do this!" And you know, this is surprising, mass extinction, blah blah blah. No, we can survive in the caves. I was like, shut the fuck. You know, I'm looking out at the audience, and people are actually. Some of them are digging this. Some of them are just eating. Some of them are not really paying attention. You know, I was like, this movie. Oh god, it just lost us. I was laughing most of the time, and laughing in a bad way.
So, as an alternative, I'm going to recommend, rather than seeing this, watch from the from the Millennium period of the Godzilla Japanese Godzilla movies. The movie Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah: Giant Monsters All Out Attack.
Yeah, I would recommend seeing either something like one of those Toho movies, or which is a very funny name to me, Toho Studios. I just like Toho, you know, or watch Shin Godzilla, which I didn't particularly hate at first. I didn't love it, but I've come to appreciate it a lot more since first viewing. Shin Godzilla is very enjoyable. It's kind of like a parody of bureaucracy.
I love how dark it is.
It's a little dark, yeah, because Godzilla isn't really. Godzilla is more of like a puppet in the movie. You know what I mean? Like, what I mean by that is not just the way he's animated, but also he's not really like he's like a just birthed creature.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's just coming out, and the movie is more or less about the bureaucracy of trying to deal with the wreckage and whose department is over what people who are going to handle Godzilla, you know, that kind of thing. And it's about them arguing with each other while this destruction goes on. And it's actually very funny, but it's also pretty grand and spectacular, you know? So it's a different kind of Godzilla movie, but that's what I liked about it. So I would say they're on a right path in the sense of the monster creatures, the designs, and the way they moved, and of course how they emoted. Everything else was terrible.
So, speaking of everything else being terrible, again, this is a bad segue.
Terrible.
Hold on. Terrible.
Terrible.
Fuck it. Just tell us about One Cut of the Dead.
Okay, so recently in New Orleans, as far as last weekend, actually, we hosted the Overlook Film Festival, which is a film festival inspired by The Shining, you know, the Overlook Hotel, and they also do a lot of what's the word for it? It's like real time horror experiences, like almost like a horror house, but it's
alternate reality games.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah. And they also have VR experiences and all sorts of role-playing stuff. And Robert Rodriguez even came down and gave a kind of a class on low-budget horror filmmaking. He even showed his new movie, which is like made for $7,000 or something. But of course, he can afford to make a movie like that. I mean, you know, I was like, okay, that's, you know.
Robert Rodriguez can afford to make a movie cheaply. That's a very interesting way to
isn't it? That's a stupid thing to say too. I don't know.
I remember back on the director's commentary for El Mariachi, for when the TriStar logo came at the beginning of the movie, he said that the TriStar logo is the most expensive thing in the movie.
Yes.
Yeah. Which you could probably buy for a nickel now, probably. I don't know.
Probably.
I don't know. But anyways, one of the movies shown at the festival was One Cut of the Dead, which has been touring festivals internationally for a couple months now, maybe a little bit longer. And
it's been released in Japan in 2017, so it's been doing the festival circuit for a long time.
Been doing it for a while now, and yeah, it takes a while sometimes internationally for things to move across countries. And famously or infamously, Amazon released it for like a couple hours before the studio or the distributor came out and said, "What the fuck, Amazon? This isn't the right time, and we haven't given you the movie yet."
Yeah,
they took a bootleg copy and just uploaded it. Ooh. So they took it down, and you know they resolved it, and the movie's going to come out pretty soon, maybe in like a month or two, something like that. But anyways, One Cut of the Dead's gimmick is that it is a single take film from beginning to end, and it is set in I guess it's like a military science experimentation, former experimentation lab. But basically, the premise is this small budget group of filmmakers have gotten together to make a zombie movie. And during the production, on this one day, zombies actually end up attacking them. And one by one, they get turned into zombies and they have to survive. And the whole time, there's this one cut. It's just one smooth, or not so much smooth, but one long take following these actors and actresses as they deal with this zombie outbreak. You would think that when you say one take or one long shot, that it's supposed to be incredibly impressive, as from a cinematography standpoint, from choreography, from all that stuff. It isn't apparent at first that that's the case. When you're watching it, it feels very much like if you ever made a home movie in high school or middle school and you don't know what you're doing and you're just kind of walking with the camera, following people. It's kind of like that. It's not particularly impressive. It doesn't look that way at first. It's just the camera's kind of going from person to person or following one particular individual as these zombies attack. There's a couple moments of comedy where it's like a zombie pauses and then lurches forward again. And there's a couple comedic cues here and there. But it doesn't appear all that impressive at first. Now, I guess this is a spoiler or a surprise. I was originally going to avoid this, but I think I had a hard time reviewing this movie without spoiling this bit. So I think maybe this is something that I can do. Is that okay, guys? That if I give away a little bit of a
that's fine.
Yeah.
A surprise? Okay. All right. So about 30 minutes in, the movie ends. One cut of the dead is over. The credits roll. And then we cut to basically like TV footage. Like the movie slowly turns into TV resolution. And we see that a couple months ago, previously, the filmmaker, the character who plays the director in One Cut of the Dead, has been contacted by producers at a TV channel, a horror TV channel in Japan, to make a one-take live broadcast zombie movie for television. And he's like, what? And then that's the real One Cut of the Dead, is the behind the scenes of how they made it. Now, it's not a real behind the scenes. This is the real movie, but this is kind of like Bowfinger. You know what I mean? From this point on, the rest of the movie is a lot like Bowfinger. It's basically this ragtag group of misfit filmmakers and actors and writers and all that trying to do a live one-take broadcast of a zombie outbreak. That's a little meta, maybe. And we see all the little tribulations and trials of them trying to get it right, because they only have one take to do it, and if they fuck up, and they have to kind of make up for it some way, or they have to cover it up, or they have to do something creative on the spot. And a lot of obstacles do in fact happen. And these obstacles that come up, like an actor is drunk, or an actor has to go to the bathroom during the shoot, or this happens or that happens. The crane that's supposed to make the last shot happen breaks down, so they have to pile up on top of one another to get this one shot. All these things happen, so the director has to think on the fly. And he's like, okay, do this instead, do that instead. And this is where the real comedy comes in, because you see how all these little awkward moments in the 30-minute One Cut of the Dead happen that you think were originally just awkward and silly and dumb. You see that there was actually a reason behind them. There was actually a purpose. Someone was trying to make up for the fact that they fucked up. And the movie is very much about the love of filmmaking, despite all of its problems, all the problems that can come up from it, and not just the love of filmmaking, but also the love of. We talk about this a lot on the show. Directors for hire, workman directors, directors who don't necessarily do a movie with a vision or a clear-cut vision, but they do have passion for what they do, and they're very good at what they do.
Right. They love the work.
They love the work. They love cinema. They love being a part of it, all that stuff. And the director of the movie ends up having to play a version of himself in the live broadcast. So while he's acting, he's also directing the actual, production. And so he's running around like a madman trying to get everything right. And meanwhile, his daughter, who's very interested in filmmaking too, who's also kind of like they're losing touch a little bit. We see some behind the scenes of them at home. She's now getting involved in this, and they kind of grow closer as a result of the movie. It's a very sweet movie. Like I said, it's very much like reminiscent of Bowfinger in terms of obstacles and DIY chutzpah.
Did they become zombies because of Chubby Rain?
No, Chubby Rain does not play into this. In fact, actually, I think what happens is actually, and I get the reference, I get it, but I think what happens actually is the director in this plot of One Cut of the Dead, the 30-minute movie, within a movie, he actually pours some blood and does like some kind of a seance or something, and that on the roof of the building, and that's what creates the zombies.
Okay.
That's what he says. They don't show it. He's like, I did a seance, but what happens? Well, in the middle of explaining it, this one character has to leave the room, and he's like, "Where are you going?" And the guy's like, I gotta use the bathroom," but he can't say it because he's an actor on camera during a live broadcast. And in the behind the scenes stuff later on in the movie, where we see what really happened, that actor had to go to the bathroom. So outside of the building, when they kind of improv his way out of the room so he can go take a shit, we see him taking a shit while the makeup artist is putting makeup on him. They're like, "No, just do it, just put makeup on him while he's taking a shit." And the guy's like, "This is embarrassing." He's like, "Well, you should have thought of that before you fucking."
And that's probably a comment on the fact that the makeup process takes so long. People are known to fall asleep during it, and
yeah. So it's like, don't worry about getting it right. Just make it look like he's a zombie. Don't worry about perfection. Just do it quickly. We're looking for quick and fast over good and perfect. Whatever. We're gonna throw him in there, and it'll be fine. And there's a lot of stuff in there like that. There's this one awkward moment where the actress has to continuously yell and scream, and we don't know why. We don't realize why, but it turns out later the actor or the actress behind the camera who was attacking the lead actress was doing so because she was way into the character. And so the director is trying to hold her back, like, dude, quit it. You're ruining the movie. And so the cameraman is just focusing on the lead girl actress, and she's like, they're telling her, just keep screaming, while we figure this out over here. And then they turn around and they show what happened. So it's a very that's the fun stuff. That's where the movie surprises you. You think it's this one long take, and it is. But then it reverses course, and it's like, oh no, actually the real movie is this interesting, heartfelt kind of comedy about the love of filmmaking and the craft of filmmaking and everything that goes on, the thankless job that is director for hire, or just directing it, period, or filmmaking, period. Every step of the crew level, from makeup to just being a handyman to being, it kind of suggests that you're not just one role in a film. You could be anything when making a movie. Like you could be asked to go, kind of like what they say at Walmart, you're not just working in the pet department, you're also a floor worker. You could be moved to any department. It's kind of like that. You could be moved to at the blink of an eye or the snap of a finger, you could go somewhere else. And it's really interesting. And to see that kind of process take place. And it's very funny. It's a very smart movie, very witty. Even though some of the actors are kind of loud and brutish a little bit, like especially the director character, even in the behind the scenes portion of the movie, he's kind of like loud, and he's like, "Hey, what are that? Oh!" He's just screaming all the time. He's. I don't mean to be. I'm not trying to be offensive. That's just my That's just my. Trying to act like him a little bit. He can kind of speak a little too loudly, but that I got the feeling that was like more of his personality. So yeah, overall, this is an extremely funny movie. I loved it. It's one of my favorites of the year. Not the favorite. The favorite is still Relaxer, but which I just bought on VOD. Actually, it's on Amazon now. So I recommend everyone go rent it or buy it. But One Cut of the Dead will be coming to VOD very soon, from what I understand. Probably Amazon, which will be very, very interesting. That relationship, and it's highly, highly, highly recommended viewing. It's just very fun. It's a breath of fresh air, and you'll feel something at the end of it.
All right.
I will look forward to seeing that. When it becomes available.
Yeah, you can't see it now because it's not available widely.
All right.
You can see it if it comes to town, but.
Well, this has been one heck of a long day's journey into night of an episode.
Oh God.
I know. Today my segues just get worse as it goes along. So.
Well, I don't know.
So Hawk and I actually watched this film together at an awesome theater in downtown Denver that has a wonderful old school Mayan look to it. Really neat place. And I have to say that I actually found out that it was only one of 12 theaters nationwide that this movie is playing in. So,
but not with 3D capability. As you said.
Unfortunately
not. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, we did not get the 3D capability. For those unfamiliar, this movie is currently topping the box office in China, and it is a sort of a it's an art film that is. I'm kind of laughing right now because I just noticed that the listing on Wikipedia says this movie's runtime is 110 minutes, and this movie is well over 2 hours.
Yeah, it's 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, someone's got to correct that. But the movie is probably the highest grossing art film that it's a full-on art film, and it's hard to explain the plot. Really,
I got it.
Okay, yeah, jump in.
All right, so the movie bounces between past and present, so about like present time-ish and 18 or so years ago. A man has returned to his hometown because his childhood friend has been murdered. And back when he was younger, he met this girl, and they were lovers for a short time. And this girl's boyfriend or whatever was very abusive, and he was a murderous gangster. They got away from that relationship, and they fled the town, and then she disappeared. Now, in the present day, he is trying to relocate her. And so he's going to different people across the town and trying to find her. All he's got is a photograph. And, he's saying, have you seen this woman? And every person that he talks to, they kind of fill in a little bit more of his memory of her. And he learns a little bit more about her and so on and so forth. And he becomes closer to finding her. So one of the interesting things about this movie is that it kind of, the past and the present are kind of woven in a way where certain elements of the present time inform his memories of the past. So one of the biggest things is that he's got this picture of her, and one of the lines he uses on a woman in the present time is, "You look like my friend," and in this photograph. And in the past, he used that same line on the same girl, or not on the same girl, I'm sorry, on the girl that he would eventually be in love with. And I don't think that actually happened. And that's getting into more of what this movie is kind of dealing with on a level of psychology where it's very dreamlike, meditative movie. And I don't think that the past is entirely authentic or trustworthy because his memory is being affected by what's happening to him in the present time. But realistically, the first hour and a half of this movie, or hour and 20 minutes, is this kind of mystery noir as he's trying to find the woman that he loved. And then in the final, when he get to a certain point, he is told he's about to find her, and he's told to wait a little bit because she works at a karaoke bar. Wait an hour, go see a movie, and relax. He goes to the movie theater, puts on a pair of 3D glasses, and falls asleep. At that point, you get the title card of the movie, Long Day's Journey into Night. And then the remaining hour of the film is one completely unbroken tracking shot. No tricks, no CGI. The director really pulled this off. And this includes the camera traveling through a bar, watching characters talk. The camera then gets attached to a drone, which flies over the city and then lands.
Damn.
And continues to travel through the city, watching characters, following them upstairs, following them through corridors. On a technical level, this movie is incredible.
Follows him down like a zip line.
What?
Follows him down like a zip line.
Oh, it follows him down a zip line. Yep. It follows a motorcycle down a road, and then follows him down a zip line. Like it's the director is 29 years old, and he somehow figured out. It took him 9 tries, and they figured out to do this entire last hour of the movie in one unbroken take. And you can kind of see like where they like had to pause, like when the camera gets attached to a drone, like the camera zooms forward a little bit, and then there's a little bit of a wobble, and then it starts flying around. But still,
they hide it pretty well.
They hide it really well. Like
if you aren't thinking about it, you probably wouldn't notice.
Right. I mean, it's not like Birdman where the camera goes through a door and then there's a pause before the door opens, and they like just stealth the cut into there. Like there's no moments like that where you're like, oh, I spot where they, hid that cut. Like there's none of those moments where it's obvious, but you can also see where they work to maintain the tracking shot, and that's fine because in those moments that they actually went for it.
Right. And really, the thing I enjoyed about this movie is just from a technical perspective. First of all, visually, even during that long tracking shot, it never ceases to look gorgeous. They found. I mean, you said earlier, Bill, every frame a painting. This movie defines that in a lot of ways. And the noir elements early on in the film really do set up the dark and moody atmosphere of it. And the spaced out, strange plot line gives them a lot of license to play around with your expectations so yeah, really visually, this movie is unquestionably a masterpiece. And if it doesn't get nominated for best cinematography, then there is no God.
I mean, I don't know if it will, but it might. It'll probably definitely get nominated for best foreign language film. And even with the last hour of the film being one long take, there are still several smaller long takes spread throughout the film that last easily 5 to 10 minutes.
Yes.
Piece. This movie is just built on long takes. And I love movies like that because it's kind of like the long take is an interesting thing because you have certain directors that use it for storytelling, and you have some directors that use it to swing their dick around. So, 2 examples.
There is a fair amount of dick swinging in the ambition that this film has, but
not.
I think you have to swing your dick a couple times. So
you get like
that.
So one that stands out to me is Terminator Salvation. There's a very long, unbroken take where the camera follows a battlefield sequence, then up into a helicopter. The helicopter flies around. There's more shooting. It lands, and then the camera comes out of the helicopter, and then the cut ends. And that's basically a McG saying, "Hey, I know you guys know that I'm McG, but look what I just did." And it was a cool action take. And London Has Fallen had a similar, very long tracking shot that was a cool action take. And those are not unmeaningful, but when a movie like Long Day's Journey into Night uses the long take, it kind of really feeds into this meditative feeling that the movie has. If it was cutting between the characters, it would kind of break the immersion of the film. But everything about this movie just feels like a dream. You just kind of sink into your seat and feel the movie because it's kind of like rain on the window, sleepy, dreamy feeling to it where you just really immerse in the story. And the fact that it's done all in one take really makes you feel like you're a part of the scene. You're just standing there watching everything happen.
Now, the one thing I will stress about this film is this movie, don't go into this movie expecting to follow the plot at first. You're probably going to have to do some reading afterwards, some homework.
Yeah.
It's a intentionally obtuse movie. And and you know, your enjoyment of the film depends almost entirely on your ability to detach your need to see a coherent narrative and to
Yeah.
instead just immerse yourself in the visual storytelling, and rather than focusing too hard on the dialogue and trying to follow a plot, you really need to just appreciate the present situation of the film.
Well, again, it is kind of it is, you know, it is like a dream in that sense where you're trying to untangle it. So I had a dream last night that hit me very hard, and the dream incorporated a lot of things that had happened to me so far in the past week, and I spent most of the day kind of thinking about that dream and sorting through the memories and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie is the same way. So the last hour of the movie, when he falls asleep at the movie theater, it's interesting. We didn't see it in 3D, but there is no, like, remember back in Spy Kids 3D when they went to the video game world, it was like, put on your 3D glasses, motherfucker! Like, it's time for the 3D part, and like it flashing on the screen in big bold letters, and it really informed the ADHD culture of today's youth. But in this movie, there's no message like that. The character puts on his 3D glasses and falls asleep, and that's a subtle cue to the audience to put on their own 3D glasses so that the movie in 3D can begin for this final tracking shot. This is when he's dreaming. So he runs into a girl early on in his dream, and he thinks that she's the woman he's been looking for, and she denies it and says she doesn't know him. But this character is played by the same actress that played his lover during the main course of the movie. Later on, he encounters a redheaded woman holding a torch, walking down, and she's talking to a beekeeper, and she's going to leave with him. In the real world, his own mother left him for the next door neighbor who was a beekeeper and abandoned the family. This redheaded woman, and then he's talking to his deceased friend's mother, who's a hairdresser, and this hairdresser says, you know, if your mom was here, what color do you think she would dye her hair? And he said red, and she kind of like gives him shit for it, but he feels very strongly that his mother would like to dye her hair red. This lady in the dream holding the torch has red hair and is played by the same actress that played the hairdresser.
Mm-hmm.
At one point in the movie, it is said that, you know, his buddy Wildcat that got killed, when he's sad, he eats an apple. And it makes him feel better. And in the dream, the main character, he starts crying when he sees the mother figure that he's imprinted on this character. He starts crying and he starts eating an apple. So everything that's happened so far in the movie kind of affects things that happen in the dream, because his dream is pulling all the elements from his life up to this point and becoming this kind of tapestry of events and emotions that he's seeing when he goes through this dream. And I say that because I've spent hours reading on the movie, watching videos, and like thinking about it and writing about it. Like this movie has not escaped my mind since I saw it over a week ago.
Mm-hmm. Same here. I have not done as much reading on it because I'm trying my best to come to terms with the movie on its without having too much input from other sources. I definitely will say that I enjoyed this movie and I would watch it again. I still don't feel I understand it, but I think in time I will. Or
it's
at
one
least
of those movies
I'll
like,
get more about it. More out of it.
It's one of those ones where like I don't understand it, and that's okay, because it's one of those ones that I'm really supposed to dig into and peel back and understand slowly. Like it's very stingy with revealing itself.
I trust that the filmmaker knew what he was doing when he made this movie. It doesn't feel like he was intentionally moving from topic to topic without any purpose.
Right. He's not being obtuse. It's just kind of one of those things where it's like you're not going to understand it right when you watch it, but that's okay, because it's not that kind of movie.
You know what? I think that there's an intentional obtuseness to this. It's meant to puzzle you, but it's in a way that you want to figure it out.
Right. I mean obtuse. It's not obtuse in the way that, oh, well, I leave it up to the audience interpretation. Like where it's being an asshole about being hard to understand. It's okay. Kind of, you know, those movies that they're kind of like. There are movies that the audience has to figure out, but eventually you get to the point where you're not entirely sure the movie itself even has its own answer.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think this one does.
Okay, yeah.
I do want to also, I want to like just shill for the landmark Mayan in Denver for a second. Like the sound, I think it was partly the remodeled theater sound setup, but also part of the movie. The audio mix in this movie is phenomenal.
Yeah. And I mean, really the entire presentation of that theater really nailed it. There were no technical issues. The screen was clean. So many times I go to the movies and the theater will have like a spot on the screen that I can tell that they're just lazy and won't fix. There's this one theater I've been going to for years that I know if the theater is in cinema, if the movie's in cinema 1, then there's going to be, and it's the afternoon, then I'm going to be able to see the afternoon sunlight through one little hole in the top left corner of the screen.
Oh no, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this theater is great. Like, I took a couple pictures when I was there. I've been there a couple of times, and I'll post them on my Twitter account. Of just some of the architecture of the theater. It's very Mayan themed. It's owned by Mark Cuban on Shark Tank, by the way.
Oh,
yeah,
Mark Cuban of Shark Tank.
Of Shark Tank, yeah, that's where I know him from.
He also happens to be a very rich guy outside of Shark Tank, and
yeah, but you know,
owns a bunch of other stuff
on Shark Tank, and he does. Other stuff
okay,
too.
I get you. Yeah, I get you. It's a popular show.
But yeah,